the usual request is for some set of organizations on GitHub.
Okay.
That's typical.
Do you want people do you want people reaching out to you to say, can you?
I mean, I have the capacity to do that. Okay, this time it worked. I had to reinstall my Gecko driver. I have no idea why.
Okay.
So,
But what? Go ahead, Don. Or
Sorry,
is
I didn't say anything.
okay. So then, what happens when any with once you've installed your Gecko driver? I really don't know why I had to reinstall it. You get these PNG files that are output to the images directory, and basically it's everything you see in the Jupyter notebook. But these, I do this really for my own purposes. When I want to run something, I seldom want to have to copy and paste everything out of a Jupyter notebook. I just want to be able to drag an image into a PowerPoint or something like that. And so we do that with the captions, and then you can use that information however you see fit. And it works the same in the pull request analysis template. So if I go to this control cell and I do save files, true, and I run all cells, it'll generate the image files for the pull requests as well. And here, I wonder what okay, we're doing pull requests. We're still doing Augur and Grimoire. Whoa, that was a strange sound. Is that me? And again, you get all this Jupyter Lab stuff at the front because it's just the way Jupyter Lab works, and all the good stuff is at the end. I don't know if there's like a Jupyter Lab god around that can tell me if there's a way to like not have to have all that in the page. But and then for the pull request ones, you'll see the average number of commits per pull request, and we just did this annually, both for merged and not merged pull requests, how many comments are on each pull request, and then the closed pull request by merge status. And here we've separated the slowest 20% from, so the slowest 20% are not, they're part of this other set, which I suppose we should make more, I guess it says all. So this is everything. In 2019, there were 252 pull requests, and 40 were not merged, and 212 were merged. Similar numbers, a little bit higher here in 2020. And the slowest 20%, it's interesting to know if the ones that are super slow to be merged actually ultimately are merged. Often they're not. Augur, in Augur they are. And then here we have the not merged mean days to closed and the merged mean days to close. So you can see everything sort of compressed down here in 2020. We're pretty fast. And then looks like we're even commenting on pull requests on average several days after they're made merged. And you can see this for any collection of repos. And this just gives you, this is a dot for all closed pull requests over time. So you can kind of see when things are happening and how long the responses take overall. And you know, what you want obviously is to be under a day. And so you can see there's some that we take longer on. And then you can also see for the pull requests, you know, how many subscribers there are on average. This is a wider graphic. I don't know what, something's goofy with my browser right now. Like Jupyter is not updating. It might be, oh, maybe it was still running. Probably was still running. So I just made it a little wider. And then you have a heat map, and you can do, there's parameters in the, okay, I'm getting really, sorry about this. My browser is acting really weird. It's like not adjusting the width. There's some instructions down here about this control cell. So there's variables. So the repo set is the list of repos, and you can say that repos not aliased, that should be. So you can like take the names out of competitors if you don't want to show them. Save files can be true or false, and your start and end dates can change depending on the analysis period that you're looking at. And we do for pull requests or for new contributors, we're looking at all new contributors all time. So regardless of when you run your time window for, if somebody's made a contribution prior to that time window, we don't count them as a new contributor within that time window. We see that they've made a prior contribution. So there's no like false counting of new contributors if you shorten the window or whatever. Yeah, that's about it. And if somebody would like to make a request, they could just, I think, I don't know, Matt, what do you suggest if somebody wants to ask for a set of repos to be collected for them as a sort of way of gathering that? Like, should I have people email me or?
Yeah, well, I would kind of defer to you. Like, if you want
Yeah.
that to be the workflow, or if you even want that workflow to exist,
Yeah, I mean, it does exist.
contact you in the first place.
Yeah, it does exist, and I actually have a outstanding commitment to this group to do some things from GitE, and I got a little wrapped up in the GitE part of it, but I'll use the GitHub clones and do that for next time.
No, but I'm even thinking like whatever some organization, some random organization just wants you to like basically build them a database for a series of repos. I mean, would you do that?
Yeah, I've done it, and I would. I mean, I think it gives us a chance to test Augur against new data, and so
Okay.
for us, that's the advantage. Is it gives us like live data, and I think we've done enough repositories now that we're not encountering new anomalies very often, but occasionally there'll be weird kinds of things. Am I really out of focus for some reason?
You are, strangely.
I don't know what. No, there's like here. I don't know what happened.
Go back slowly.
Yeah, like I looked at myself like you're blurry, dude. um, but yeah, it's by the GitHub organization. It's pretty easy to gather stuff.
I mean, like, do you want a formal, so I was thinking like the community reports, right? We've been working with the Linux Foundation, which is not this. So the
Yeah.
community reports, we've been working on a formal way that's going to actually end up on the web page by which an organization could commit, request a pretty low overhead and not super detailed community report. This is slightly different than that in that, you would provide kind of a whole, like kind of the whole data.
Yeah, I suppose the way to do that would be to make a blog post for the first time in a whole long time on the Augur Labs website and provide a way for people to request an Augur database. That would be, I think, the way to do that.
Do we have
I can
just like if you had 100 requests, have the
like
capacity?
100, that would be a lot. I probably don't have the capacity to do that fast.
Okay.
So I think it would be fair to say, yeah.
Okay. It was more a question of like, is this a service you want to provide broadly, or is it more like a secret service?
It's not yeah, I guess I don't think it's hard to provide it broadly, really, because creating an Augur instance is not super difficult.
Mm-hmm.
It's in fact not, I mean, for me, especially for us, we do it all the time. So I think the feedback is from an Augur perspective, the feedback is valuable enough that I'll offer it broadly until it becomes a problem.
Okay.
So far the requests informally have not posed a problem, and I think yeah. So I'll put a form on the Augur Labs site
To make that request.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Just because yesterday it came up that the notebooks are a pretty valuable resource that people seem to like.
Yeah.
And there's obviously a little bit of back end work that needs to be done. And so like one option is just to say, we don't do any of that back end work for you. Like as a community, we can just kind
Yeah.
of pass and say, we don't do that. So if you want to use the Jupyter Hub notebooks that we have, you have to deploy your own instance of Augur and collect the data yourself. That's an option. The other option is saying you can do that, or we will actually collect the data for you and provide you read-only access to a database for the repos that you would like.
Yeah. And I think that's what we'll do.
Okay.
From an Augur perspective, it just makes sense to get the feedback.
So then, yeah, so I guess I had brought that up because I just didn't want to like over commit resources that you don't have, because that request will like squarely land with you.
Yeah, I have through the requests we have so far, it's pretty easy if someone has like a set of GitHub organizations. I think for if we get in the neighborhood of like beyond 3,000 repos, I think sometimes the collection takes longer than people expect, and that's really the first collection that takes a long time because you're counting the commits in every repo, and it depends on it's a function of how the repository has been maintained. And if you have a lot of repositories that have been like fundamentally refactored one or more times, where basically every file changes, then you get these gigantic commits, and those just take longer to count the first time.
Okay.
And but once you're through the first time, then it doesn't take that long to continuously update it. It's just that, you know, the time it takes to get the data is a function of how much you ask for.
Sure.
And the nature of the way that work has been done.
Okay. So the request would be basically then, like on the Augur Lab site, somebody could make a request, but that request would basically, it sounds like, say, like, Sean, I'd like to have a conversation with you.
Yeah.
Setting up a database.
Yep.
Because you could explain all of that to them, kind of in an out of band conversation.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
And then I guess one more question: What do you have a cadence that you're hoping to set for the release of new notebooks?
Right now, for example, I have one of our developers working on a notebook for issues and all of the questions that are related to issues. So, I mean, the cadence is probably monthly.
Okay.
We also have some folks who develop notebooks on their own that I may ask if they want or are willing to share obviously not the data, but any of the notebook work that they've done, I may ask for that. If anybody's willing, that's done notebooks on their own, is willing to share stuff.
Because I know Grimoire Lab has a new tool that they're working on called Broomstick. And Broomstick is, that's right, just stick with it, right? And Broomstick
hang with us here for a second. Yeah,
is a tool that is doing just this. It's providing notebook access to the Elasticsearch data on the back end. So we're going to have two tools that are kind of providing Jupyter Hub notebook functionality. And so I'm wondering if the way that we do metrics releases, and then the software obviously has its own releases, but notebooks seem a little bit different than like just a software release, obviously. So do you think there's value in saying that we could do like every 6 months, we could also do notebook releases? Like here are the Grimoire Lab notebook releases, and here are the Augur notebook releases.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't thought about that before, but and have those maybe go through a review process, like the metrics, you think?
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, we could almost just follow the same approach, or it could be more informal for a year. You know what I mean? Just to kind of see how
Yeah,
it looks and feels.
because I think the interesting thing about that idea, which had not occurred to me before, is that the atomic metrics we're defining are useful to the community primarily because they create standard definitions of all the things that we spend, early in the project, we spent days, weeks, months debating what a commit is and how to count it. And I think those debates have existed in the open source community for some time. And we don't claim to have the right answer, but we have a consistent answer to that question so that people can use the tools that are part of the CHAOSS project and get consistent results from them. And so similarly, what these notebooks are doing is really aggregating a whole set of these metrics and displaying them in a way that people can more easily consume them. So on the new contributors is a measure, but we're showing you new contributors over time and putting some specific parameters on what kinds of contributions are being counted in these notebooks.
Right.
We're not saying they are the right ones to count. They're just the ones that we included because they're the ones that have been most commonly asked about. And then, I mean, I think there's also a cadence, at least on the Augur project, where we've actually exported, like we've saved all of these first two notebooks as Python files, and we're probably going to be able. I'm not exactly sure how we'll deploy them to the front end, but we may just start include buttons that run all the PNGs and generate them on an Augur page, so that you could run those reports against your instance anytime without a Jupyter notebook, which would get rid of some of the having to look at it, but take away your ability to customize just a bit.
So
yeah, I mean,
yes.
there were like a 6 months review. I mean, I guess I babbled there for a bit, but I guess my point was that these are actionable representations of usually more than one metric.
Yep, totally.
And that's what's different about the notebooks. And I think for that to go through a community review process similar to the metrics, so that people can actually put eyes on this in a context and say, I have a question about where this data came from, or this data isn't what I expected. And it become almost kind of a peer review that, or according to the metric, we don't count this or that. Like it could be a peer review of these reports in a sense, that the community does a review process for. So if that's something the community wants to make part of the larger CHAOSS project or process, I think that's good.
I don't know if other people have thoughts on this, or even tracking what we're talking about.
King.
Sorry, I was out.
Go ahead, Dawn.
I was just gonna say, we don't do a review period on any of the code that we release.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think I don't know. I guess I feel like a review process would be overkill for the Jupyter notebooks. I feel like people who are using them can go ahead and provide feedback on them.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems to me like just getting them out for people to play around with is probably more important than putting them through a final review process. Because I feel like the metrics are different. Like the metrics are the output for the CHAOSS project, right? That's what we do. Yep. And so I feel like the review process on those is appropriate.
So do you think that the Jupyter Hub notebook should be provided in a more structured way? Like maybe on the website, or not really? So like one of the things that we're always trying to work on is how do we connect the metrics with the tooling to get it out in front of people? And so I'm not sure people track like the software releases so much. So if Grimoire Lab has a release, that's great, but I don't know that that's tracked too much, or Augur has a new release. It's updates to the tool itself. the Jupyter Hub notebooks seem to be this kind of middle ground to me between putting the metrics into practice and the software that does the work to actually represent those metrics. So I'm not making an argument. I'm just thinking out loud here of,
I'm paraphrasing what you're saying in the notes.
sure, of whether or not we want these Jupyter Hub notebooks to be like a little bit more front and center, something that we talk about a little bit more broadly, like, hey, we have these new notebooks that have been released that put the metrics into practice, or something like that. Kind of the way that we talk about, say, the D&I badging program. Like, hey, we have this new badging program that's putting these metrics into practice. And if we do it with the notebooks or not, so I don't know that, again, I'm not making it stand anywhere. I'm just talking through this because I thought about this morning.
Yeah, I mean, I think to sort of synthesize Don's point and yours, I think what you're really talking about maybe is more formalizing review of how we take these atomic metrics and mush them together so that people can generate reports that an organization can act on. And maybe it's just that example. Maybe it's not a review process, but sort of drawing attention to those examples.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I totally appreciate the comment. Like, a review process is probably too much overhead in this case to actually try to run that, and we just do the metrics. But how do we get the Jupyter Hub notebooks kind of represent? So when we do a release, that's kind of a thing, and that we can talk about that thing of the metrics, and that gets out in front of people. And yeah, the Jupyter Hub notebooks, I agree, like doing a formal review process, probably too much to manage. And but yeah, how do we get those out in front of people, to your point, Sean?
Yeah.
Like, these are real examples. These are real life examples using the real life CHAOSS tools.
I think we could maybe have a separate section on the website for it. And like when we do have a new one, we can talk about it on Twitter, or, if we, have people who are speaking at conferences and things like that, if those ever come back, or online conferences. That's something that we can talk about and promote as just like you said, is the same as our metrics. I kind of agree with we don't need a formal review process, because it doesn't really matter like what version you're going with, right? Like, it'll just be a dynamic thing that we'll release and will morph over time as we get feedback. Is that right? Or is it like, nope, this is the version that you're going to use and we will never change this?
No, feedback. I think feedback is really important. I mean, we put them out. We put them out there because we did them with some groups, because these are questions they wanted answered, and I think they're more widely useful. Like, I think the things that one set of organizations wanted answered are not probably uninteresting to many organizations, and so that's how the 2 Jupyter notebooks that we published came to be. And I think if people went and made use of them and said, I'd also like this, or even because they're Jupyter notebooks, built additional things and wanted to share them back, I think that would be very, very helpful.
That would be a really awesome way to build community. Sorry, Dawn, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, go ahead.
But to really encourage that and keep them somewhere, either on the website or in, links in a repo somewhere or something like that, I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, I love your idea of putting them on the website so people can find them more easily. I think that would be great, and we could put the Augur ones right along with any that the Grimoire Labs team does as well. But I do think we need to keep in mind that the use of the Jupyter notebooks is going to be a bit niche. Like, it's going to be people who tend to have a Python background, who tend to have used the notebooks before. I don't see the notebooks getting like big, broad adoption the way the metrics release might.
Yeah.
Agree with you, Don. It's a good idea. And okay. By the way, today I have to introduce a senior expert in China, and he is a person in charge of the internet source he is the owner of the project. Mr. Zhou Daibing is on the meeting, and he have some questions to want to ask you. So okay.
Yeah.
OK。戴斌，你可以问一下，就是关于内源的问题啊。OK。
Hi everyone.
Hi.
My name is Lebin, and I come from Huawei, and I'm now implementing the inner source in Huawei. And we think inner source is a way we want to use open source like development in the enterprise. But we have some problems about the inner source, so we want every open source support to give us some advice. And the first question is, and just like I heard Mr. Sim introduced before, and I wanted to know, does the community health metrics and the report should for the inner source?
So for inner source, any of the tools on the GitHub repository for the CHAOSS organization could be used, and you would just have to point them at, so for example, it depends on what your inner source team uses for Git repository tracking. If it's a set of private GitHub repositories, then you can operate any of these tools just as you would ordinarily, as long as you have credentials on the user that you're using to clone the private repos. And there's ways that both Grimoire Lab and Augur can do that. And so, and if it's just a Git repository, then you're only going to get commit data. If you're using something like GitLab or GitHub's enterprise platforms for your inner sourcing, then you can also use these tools to gather the kind of data, like issue data and pull request data that's available on the public platforms that each of those companies offers. So how much of the data is available for inner sourcing is definitely a function of what technologies you're using. There are technologies, Grimoire Lab supports things that Augur doesn't support. Augur's committed to prototyping GitHub and GitLab and all of their functions. But I think Grimoire Lab also handles Garrett and other kinds of issue tracking sites as well. So it depends. It really depends on what you're trying to get.
Yeah, very well. And we allow deploy the GitLab in the Huawei Intel, and some project we can set up the project in this system. So if we use this GitLab, and we can get some metrics from the inner source project, but now we don't know how to use this metrics, and how to evaluate the inner source project. Does this community is health or not? And we don't know how to drive this project.
Internally, Dawn, I know you've managed metrics projects inside of large organizations and have created systems that use different tools. Do you have any thoughts on how a company that is just starting to understand how to make sense of these metrics and the tools might begin that process?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, so most of the metrics I've done though have been on open source projects and not on inner source, so it's a little bit different. But like you said, as long as you have the repositories and you have access to them, you can run any kind of metrics on them. But I also think that the metrics that are important from an inner source perspective are probably different than the metrics that I would use for for open source projects, because I think you probably care about measuring different things because it's, it's internal. The one question I have you looked at the Inner Source Commons website already? Have you already, because I know that some of the people who work on inner source metrics have been involved in that project.
Yeah, it's a very good advice, and we study from the source comments, and we get some just some information from that website, and we before many years ago I discussed with with the Cedric in the paper, who drive the source in the paper, and but now we think some problems in Huawei, so we are thought of what are the problems the source are usually solved in the enterprise.
If I'm understanding what you're saying, and I'll say that Augur is an open source project that exists to help the CHAOSS project and the prototyping of these metrics. I think, but we don't have like a services organization that could help you sort through that. Grimoire Lab does, and they have it's called, what, Bitergia is the company, right? So they have a company called Bitergia, and it sounds like what you're asking about might be something that a service organization that's familiar with our metrics could be useful for. I'm not trying to plug that, but it sounds like there's a sort of understanding what your needs are process that needs to take place. I don't know what Matt or others think of what I just suggested.
No, I agree. Go ahead, Don.
Oh, I was just gonna say I dropped a link to the Bitergia Inner Source consulting services page if you wanted to look at that. I do think it probably wouldn't hurt to get a little bit of professional help with it, whether it's Bitergia or someone else. But I think it might help to have someone come in and kind of walk you through some of the particular issues associated with metrics and inner source.
Mm-hmm. And I know that
thanks, Dan.
And I know that the inner source commons that Don had mentioned, Daniel Esquerdo, who's at Bitergia, has really helped, and with the CHAOSS project has really helped kind of tie those efforts together. So Daniel at Bitergia is also very skilled in thinking about metrics that are applicable from an inner source perspective.
Yeah, so I would say, yeah, I think they have the people who've done that before that could have the time and obviously for a fee be able to help you through it. I don't think it's anything we have resources to do as a CHAOSS project.
I did make a note that we have never thought about metrics, I don't think, from an inner source perspective. So to Don's point earlier, that the metrics that you would look at inner source wise are likely different than what you would look from an open source perspective. And I don't think we've ever really had that conversation about distinguishing between them.
Okay, I just have questions for Sean. I just go through the notebook and if I want to play with it, I need connect to the database. So
Well, you need access to an Augur instance. If you're not able to get to these servers are located in Europe, so I don't know if if you're IP restricted or not able to access those instances. I recognize it's been an issue, like for example with Google Forms on the Asia Pacific call before. If you have, do you have people familiar with Postgres in your organization?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I could send you a. Go ahead. Postgres database.
Okay, yeah. You mean you just dump the data?
Yeah, I could just I mean, given I understand the challenges with internet restrictions in parts of the Asia Pacific, and so if you want, I could just dump the instance that has the CHAOSS data in it today, so that you could play with it. Exporting a Postgres database is trivial.
Okay. I will ping with you about that. In the meantime, I still try to play with the Augur. So I just want to ask for the Git plugin. Do you think
the Git, yeah. So Anupamor Lab is actively working on a Git plugin, and I'm still in the figuring it out stage. I think they may be as well, but I just can't speak for them. It's a new platform for all of us, and it's unlike GitLab or GitHub where many of us have used it before, none of us have used Git before, and so we're just trying to become familiar enough with it. And if there's
okay, don't worry. I think we could give some help from that, and I just need to know if you can point me to example or something, so maybe I can do some contributions for the Git plugin.
Oh, I can point you to the Augur example for that if you want. Some of it I think is reasonably well documented in our Read the Docs instance. So under the, and we may not have, basically we have what are called workers, and so it's the goal. What you'd have to do is write a worker for Git to collect the data. I'll drop that in the notes.
Okay. I will take a look at it. So
I lost the notes when I went to. There we go.
So basically, if the repo, if it's a Git repo, so Augur can gather the data. But if we want to
for commits,
get the if we want to get the issue and PR, then we need to implement another plugin.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Yep.
Understand.
And I can, if there's a pretty standard process for building workers, and maybe I'll if you download it and you want to just contact us with questions through the Augur issues, you just open an Augur issue and say, I'm trying to build a worker for Git, and these are questions I have. I think it's hard for us to know if we've documented enough. But there are, so any issues you have as you go about trying to build a worker, you can just open them as issues on Augur, and we can have the correspondence that way.
Okay, understand that.
Okay. Matt, so today we overtime 4 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for your help.
Sure. No problem.
Next week or next time we meet, we'll start with questions from you.
Yeah.
Let's
make that a goal.
Begin that way. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.